Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's Word Study. Today we're going to be talking about the resurrection. Of course, we think of the rapture. I like to use the word Netchatef, but that is the resurrection, the first resurrection anyway. But first, take a look at these pictures I got from Perry Kelly. You can see more of Perry's work at digitalravenart.com. And Perry's done some pictures with the odiote in them, and I thought this artwork was really nice, so I just thought I'd share it with you. Now, getting to today's study. First, many have been taught to believe that there's only one general resurrection of all the dead at the end of the world. But nowhere in the Word do we see that the bodies of all men will be raised at the same time. It's true that all the dead will be raised and brought into judgment, but neither the time, the place, nor the judgments are the same. The Word clearly distinguishes between a first and a second resurrection. It's the body only which dies and is buried. Therefore, it can only be the body that is raised from the dead, not the soul or the ruach, spirit, small r. Someone recently said to me that, Lazarus was raised from the dead before Yeshua. And, I knew where he was coming from, but, I had to explain. Lazarus was raised from the dead, but he died again shortly thereafter. And the fact that Lazarus was raised from the dead has nothing to do with the resurrection. So just want to make that clear. There are two references in the Word to the resurrection of the dead. One is from Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, where it says, "And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting chai, and some to shame and everlasting contempt and abhorrence." Then also Isaiah chapter 26, verse 19, we read, "Your dead shall live, O Yahweh. The bodies of our dead Kodeshim shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew, O Yahweh, is a dew of sparkling light, heavenly, supernatural dew. And the earth shall cast forth the dead to life again. For on the land of the shades of the dead, you will let your dew fall." It's interesting to me how the very next verse in Isaiah speaks of those who have been resurrected in the Netchatef. Isaiah 26:20 reads, "Come, my people, enter your rooms and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until Yahweh's wrath is past." That's the verse that comes right after the verse that talks about the resurrection of the dead. And of course, verse 19 is talking about the first resurrection. And then the Father's word says, "Enter your rooms, shut your doors behind you, hide yourselves for a little while until Yahweh's wrath is past." That's his wrath, that's the tribulation. So there's another clear statement that there is the first resurrection, and those who were taken up in the Netchatef are in the Shamayim, in their rooms, hiding themselves for a little while until Yahweh's wrath, the great tribulation, has passed. Now, in the book of Job, that's the oldest book in the Bible, and that is Job. Job was firm in his belief of the resurrection. We see in Job chapter 19, verses 25 through 27, it reads, "For I know that my Redeemer and Vindicator lives, and to the end he will stand over the earth. And after my skin, even this body has been destroyed. Then in my flesh I will see Eloah, whom I, even I, shall see for myself, and on my side, and my eyes shall behold him, and not as a stranger. My heart pines away and is consumed within me." And then in the book of John, that's Yochanan, chapter 5, verses 28 and 29, we read, "Do not be surprised, and don't wonder about this, for the time is coming when all those who are in the tombs shall hear his voice, and they shall come out. Those who have done good will be raised to the resurrection of Chai, and those who have practiced evil will be raised to a resurrection of judgment, raised to meet their sentence." In the book of Revelation, that's Chazon, chapter 20, verses 4, 5, and 6, we read, "Then I saw thrones, and sitting on them were those to whom authority to act as judges and to pass sentence was entrusted. Also, I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to Yeshua and for preaching and testifying for the word of Yahweh, and who had refused to pay homage to the beast or his statue or his image, and had not accepted his mark or permitted it to be stamped on their foreheads or on their hands. The remainder of the dead were not restored to Chai again until the 1,000 years were completed. This is the first resurrection. And they lived again and reigned with Mashiach for 1,000 years. Now, in many English versions of the Bible, you'll see that part where it says the remainder of the dead were not restored to Chai again until the 1,000 years were completed. In brackets, because it's a parenthetical statement, it's a side note. But where he says, "This is the first resurrection," he is referring to verse 4, everything that's said prior to the remainder of the dead were not restored to Chai again until the 1,000 years were completed. So, you have to be careful with that reading in there. The King James and the New King James, they both kind of mess that up. But if you look at other versions, you'll see a part that's in parentheses. That's a side note. And when he says this is the first resurrection, he's talking about everything above that statement there. It gets a little funny there. There are many English versions that do get that right, but I just want to make sure you're clear on that. Then it goes on and says, "Baruch and Kodesh, happy to be envied and spiritually whole, of unimpaired innocence and proved virtue, is the person who takes part in the first resurrection. Over them, the second death has no power or authority, but they shall be Kohanim, priests of Yahweh, and of Mashiach, Yeshua, and they shall reign with him 1,000 years." Note, the first death, here the word talks about the first death and the second death. The first death is physical, has to do with separation of the soul, the living experience, from the body. And the second death is spiritual, that is separation of the soul, the living experience, from Elohim. Now, the first resurrection, and the second resurrection, these are categories, not events. Let me repeat that. The first and second resurrections are categories, not events. The first resurrection includes Yeshua when he was raised from the dead, and those who were taken in the Netchatef some 2,000 years later. And the second resurrection happens at the end of the millennium and includes all the unbelievers who go to the great white throne judgment. Now, there are those during the tribulation who are raised after having been beheaded. That is also a part of the first resurrection category. You know, if you're looking at it as events, there are three events: Yeshua being raised from the dead, then the Netchatef, and then those during the tribulation who became believers and did not take the mark of the beast and were beheaded. Those, three, they're not events, it's a category. Those three are all the first resurrection. The second resurrection, again, happens at the end of the millennium and has to do with all the unbelievers who go to the great white throne judgment. They're given a fair trial and then sentenced to the outer darkness. And there is the second death, separation of the soul, the living experience, and the spirit from Elohim. The Father sends no one to hell, as people like to refer to it, or to, the outer darkness for all of eternity. He doesn't do that. Those people made a choice. They all said, I don't believe in Elohim. I don't want to have anything to do with him. So he says, okay, you can go out there to the outer darkness where you'll have nothing to do with me, complete and total separation from Elohim, the Father, his Son, and his Ruach, his Spirit. This is a place where there is no hope. Now, here's a note. All English Bibles, except for the HalleluYah Scriptures, have made an error that I can find no explanation and no excuse for. And that is in Philippians chapter 3, verses 10 and 11. If you look, you'll see the word resurrection in verse 10 and again in verse 11. But if you look those scriptures up in Strong's, or if you look up the word resurrection in Strong's exhaustive concordance of the Bible, you'll see the original Greek has anastasis, that's resurrection, for verse 10. But it's ex-anastasis, which means out of the resurrection, for verse 11. Now, why would they put resurrection for both? Shaul, that's Paul, is writing there, and he's talking about the resurrection, the first resurrection, of course, in verse 10. And then he goes on and saying, like, if only somehow, maybe, I might attain to those who are taken out of the Netchatef. So there are those who are, in love with Elohim much more than with anything to do with the world. They belong to him. And Yeshua comes at the Netchatef, commonly called the Rapture, and he takes all those who belong to him. Now, Shaul in Philippians 3:11 is saying, boy, if I could be in that group that is taken out of that group. I believe it's possible that he's talking about the actual bride of Yeshua, that many are taken up in the Netchatef, but then the bride is taken out of those. Not all of those are the bride. That's how I see that. But the question is, why would these translators, they see in the Greek, they're all looking at the Greek at that, time and translating into English, and Philippians 3, verse 10 says anastasis. Okay, that's resurrection. Translate that into English as resurrection. Verse 11, they see ex anastasis, which means out of resurrection. And they go, well, we don't understand that. We can't explain it. So, we know better than the Father does. Just put resurrection. Whatever. That's the problem with translating the Father's original word into any other language other than the one he penned it in, Aramaic Hebrew, not even Greek. Anyway, in the Aramaic, Philippians 3:10 uses the word dak yamte, and that is spelled Dalet, the door, Kuf, which is the sun at the horizon, has to do with a cycle being completed. Yod, picture of an arm and a hand, has to do with the Father's work, what he makes, his actions, and what he does. And then Mem, it's a picture of water, has to do, the word is water, we are washed by the word, and it has to do with the blood of Yeshua. And Tau, picture of crossed sticks, Yahweh's sign, a monument in time. And then finally we have Hey, picture of a spiritual man. It's like, behold, and it has to do with the fifth dimension of spirit. Someone said to me, what do you mean the fifth dimension of spirit? Where do you get that from? Well, we have three dimensions, width, breadth, and height. The fourth dimension is time. And I'm just saying the fifth dimension is ruach, spirit. So, the Aramaic word dak yamte is talking about, this is the first resurrection, the door. Yeshua is the door. And, Dalet is talking about moving from the physical into the spiritual through that door. Kuf is the sun rising in the east, going back to the beginning where the light is, as opposed to its setting in the west where the darkness is. Yod is talking about this is Yahweh's work and his actions with Yeshua and the Ruach. Mem talking about those who are washed in the word and purchased by the blood of Yeshua. Tau, this is a monument in time, the Netchatef is. And, hey, the fifth dimension of spirit and the Ruach is taken off the earth. So, there you have the word for resurrection in Aramaic is dak yamte. It's talking about those who go through that door from the physical into the spiritual because of Yeshua. They're going back to the Father, back to the beginning, Kadam. And this is all done through the work and the actions of Elohim, through his word and his blood. It is a monument in time and, done with the Ruach, the Father's Ruach, because when the Netchatef happens, those who leave, the Ruach is taken off the earth. And he who restrains evil is gone. Evil will no longer be restrained on the earth. That's something. Now, in verse 11, Philippians chapter 3, that is out of resurrection. And that word there is lakyam ta'ah. And that is spelled lamed, picture of a staff, the protector, teacher of the flock, those who are yoked to Yeshua. Then we have Kuf, sun at the horizon, cycle being completed. Yod, picture of an arm and a hand, has to do with Elohim's work and actions. Mem, the water, the word, Yeshua's blood. And then this one closes out with Aleph Tau, the beginning and the end, being yoked to Abba Father, Aleph, Yahweh's sign, Tau, and a monument in time, Tau. So, the difference, we have Dak Yam Te is resurrection. And then we have Lak Yam Ta'ah, which is out of the resurrection. The difference being, you might say the heart of the word here is Kuf Yod Mem. That part is the same in both words, going back to the beginning, Kuf, back to the light, back to the Father, through his work and actions, Yod, and through being washed by the word and purchased by the blood of Yeshua. But with Dak Yam Te, on the front of the word we have Dalet, that's the door, Yeshua, and on the end we have Tau, monument in time, and He, the Ruach, those who have the indwelling Ruach. Whereas with Lak Yam Ta'ah, in verse 11, the first letter is Lamed, the staff, and then it's closed out. Instead of Tau He, it's closed out with Tau Aleph. So really the difference is the staff in the front of the word and Aleph at the end. The staff, Yeshua, who teaches and protects his sheep. And Aleph, those who are yoked to Yahuwah, there's the key difference there. And again, I think the real difference is with resurrection, Dak Yam Te, verse 10, Dalet and He. Whereas Lak Yam Ta'ah, out of the resurrection, the difference being Lamed and Aleph. In the front, the differences are Dalet and Lamed. Resurrection, out of the resurrection. Resurrection, Dalet, the door. Those who go from the physical to the spiritual because of Yeshua. As opposed to out of the resurrection, Lamed, those who are really yoked to Yeshua himself. And then the end of the word with Dak Yam Te, resurrection, we have He, the Ruach, those who have the indwelling Ruach, which is kind of a general thing. All those take and do. But with out of the resurrection, Lak Yam Ta'ah, the difference is Aleph, those who are yoked to the Father. Again, I see that it shows a difference between those who belong to Elohim, they're all taken, and then that group that's taken out, that Shaul talks about in verse 11, the bride, those who have a greater love and dedication to Elohim. That's just my way of looking at it. This is a complex scripture to study. Now, the root word for resurrection in Aramaic is chayat, and that is spelled chet, picture of a fence, has to do with protecting and surrounding, has to do with the Netchatef, has to do with chai, eternal life, and it has to do with the operation of the gifts of the Ruach. Then we have Yod, picture of an arm and a hand. It has to do with work, what one makes, actions, what one does. And Tau, picture of crossed sticks, Yahweh's sign, and has to do with a monument in time. So, Chayat, this is the root word for resurrection. And again, it talks about the Netchatef, those who were taken before the day of Yahweh's wrath, those who are operating with the gifts of the Ruach, and because of the work and actions of Elohim, they have the Father's mark on them, and they are a monument in time for all of eternity, those who are taken. So there we have our study on the resurrection. The Netchatef is a part of this category known as the first resurrection. And the Netchatef is resurrection, is the greater word here. Netchatef I covered in a previous video, I think quite a while back, but that's an Aramaic word, and it basically means kidnapped. And that's our study for this week, my friends. As always, I hope and I pray that this study is a berakah to you and to yours. Abba willing, I'll see you here next week. Until then, shalom, my friends. Yeah. Now 2,000 years have gone by, it's another working day. Some would rather let it lie, but the question still remains.